why Apple is having a little trouble with the manufacturing of the iPhone Ultra. This is the story. Apple tipster shoots down the rattling hinge rumor for the iPhone Ultra, but reveals another rumor that they're having. So there's been some rumblings behind the scenes that the production of the iPhone Ultra, if you're not aware, the official name for the iPhone that's going to fold, their new foldable, is going to be called iPhone Ultra. Now, as I mentioned, there's been some rumblings behind the scenes that it's not going so pretty. Like they're running into issues here, issues there. And look, this is their very first foldable, so you do have to kind of give them a mulligan, meaning like you kind of have to give them a pass. Foldables are incredibly hard to design, incredibly hard to manufacture, produce, sell, right? Especially this being their very first one. They've had this in the works for years, but actually putting things into motion, stuff's going to pop up. Something you didn't anticipate happening happens. And you got to go back to the drawing board. You got to physically have to go to the manufacturing plant to see what you can do, or have the model shipped to you that are messing up to kind of give to your R&D team. Long story short, they resolved a early issue in the manufacturing process, but now they have a whole nother issue on their hand that might push back the launch date of this iPhone Ultra. So this iPhone Ultra was expected to launch alongside the iPhone 18 Pro and iPhone 18 Pro Max in September. They might have to push it back. This could ruin their entire launch for this upcoming iPhone series. So there is a tipster that essentially put to rest the rattling hinge that was popping up on some early production units. Apparently, they've got that under control, but now leaks some information where now they have a whole nother problem. There is an issue with the PCB, which is the printed circuit board, the board that the chip sits on, that the memory sits on, that all the other stuff, the motherboard essentially. They have an issue with that could bottleneck the production of these. So the challenges that surfaced is the SMT, the surface mount technology for the iPhone Ultra. It's limiting their production capacity. So what the issue is they're having issues actually putting, because they're soldered on there, the memory onto the motherboard, the CPU. They're having issues mounting, soldering those components onto that PCB, onto that little motherboard inside of that phone. It could lead to a delay in the launch of their foldable. As I mentioned, the company is also implementing a color filter technique to create thinner, more efficient OLED displays for this foldable. So this foldable display is made by Samsung, and it's going to have some first ever technology in there. Color filter on encapsulation, and also the hinge is a first ever. Now this hinge is supposed to be crease free, right? Creases have gotten a little smaller on foldables as time has gone on, but they're still there. You can still see a crease. Even the almost creaseless, what is it? The Oppo Find N6, the Find N6 that just came out from Oppo maybe last month. That is supposedly has an almost creaseless display. However, if you look at it under certain lighting, it's still there. You can still see it. But this iPhone Ultra is supposed to be the world's first creaseless display, and Apple absolutely did not want to launch this if it had a crease. In fact, as I mentioned, they've been working on it for years. Well, that's one thing that's kind of delayed this whole process throughout the years, is they were not going to put one out unless it had a creaseless display. And apparently they found a special hinge that's filled with liquid metal that they patented, that they own, that they're going to put in production. It just seems that they're having some production issues with that little motherboard, that PCB board inside the device. So will it push back the launch? We don't know. stay tuned to the channel because I'm going to be all over this, because this could screw up the entire iPhone 18 launch. Because what do they do? They were going to launch the Pro Max and the Fold in September. Remember, they went to a split launch, kind of like Samsung does. They're going to, they have launches every 6 months. They'll do their flagships and they'll do their foldables. Well, Apple, instead of launching everything in September, we're just going to launch the Pro Max and the Fold in September, and then they're going to launch the iPhone 18, 18 Plus, and 18 Air in, I think in, when was it? I think in March of next year. So interesting to see if they push back the Fold to March. They might have to. They've already started producing these, but it looks like it's not going so smoothly. So we will definitely see how this goes. And not looking good for Apple, but those are issues you run into and you try to get rid of, right?